welcome those of you who are showing us that you are here. It is nice to see you. I see many of you who are here in a black box with your name. So I'm glad those of you with the black box with your name. I'm getting messages. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. You can assume the jokes are working. Thank you, Susan. I'll assume. You know what happens when you assume? That's a joke in my family. I can't say it because we're recording and that would be inappropriate. Are you laughing? I can't tell. I don't know. All right. Well, it's really nice to see everybody here. I hope everyone is having a good Passover, that you are, not too matzah'd out at this point. I know that I am definitely getting there, definitely getting to the point of having had enough matzah. But, affliction is the point. We're supposed to be getting uncomfortable. And with that in mind, I wanted to give us the chance to dig deeper into some of the big questions, big conversations of Passover. As all of you who are on here know or are learning, the story of Passover is one that encourages us to look at our deep past, to look way back at the Jewish origin story, and to begin to think about how the Jewish origin story teaches us to act today in our lives, how it teaches us to respond to others in our community, even though the circumstances may be different. How do the lessons still hold? So I'd like for us to think just for a moment about the four children. We typically tell this story, we used to always say the four sons. I think we can broaden it. So we have the four children. We have the wise child, we have the wicked child, we have the simple child, and the child who doesn't know how to ask. And when we approach that child who doesn't know how to ask, we say to that child, we tell this story because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. Because of what God did for me, not for them, not for our ancestors, but for us here today. And so with this story present in our minds and in our hearts and on our tables, whether we did it through Zoom or whether we had a seder quietly at home on our own, whether we watched something on YouTube, however it was that you participated in your seder, with that bite of matzah that each one of us has probably had at this point, even if it was gluten-free or everything flavored or whatever it was, the point of it is to remember this piece of who we are, to remember this way that we came to be who we are. And then it's not just about digging into the past, but about looking towards the future and trying to understand what this teaches us about how we relate to the world around us. We were strangers in the land of Egypt, so therefore we welcome the stranger. And what does that mean for us today? So tonight we're going to dig into some of the difficult questions specifically around immigration today in our country, in our world, and what is our Jewish responsibility when it comes to these questions. And I want to say off the bat, and I'm not afraid to say off the bat, that we are a diverse, in many ways, a diverse community at CBI, that not everybody falls to the same even spot on the political spectrum. And so we're going to come from different places when it comes to questions around immigration and how we enact those words of what it means to welcome the stranger. So if you think way back to Yom Kippur, we had that conversation. We spoke with a mediator and a family therapist and a politician about how do we agree to disagree. And the prevailing theme was the only way that we can agree to disagree and have those difficult conversations is by opening ourselves up to truths that are sometimes hard to hear, even when it's not the truth that we carry as our truth. How do we open ourselves up to it? So with that in mind, with that open-heartedness and that willingness to hear uncomfortable things and to look one another in the eye and say, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I'm listening and I hear you. I want to welcome our friend and our partner and our colleague, Eddie Chavez Calderon, who, oh my goodness, I was so busy looking at other things that I put away your bio, but I will tell you what I know. Oh, here it is. So Eddie works for Arizona Jews for Justice, which is, housed right down the street from me, kind of on the campus of Temple High, correct? Yes, our friends over at Temple High. And Eddie has been involved in justice work since he was a teenager. And Eddie says that it is his mission to fight for a more inclusive, diverse America, from the trenches to the coasts and everywhere in between. And so tonight, Eddie, we are ready to respectfully listen as you share your story about immigrating from Mexico at 4 years old, your experience as a DACA recipient, and your work in the Jewish community. I know I've got some questions for you. I'm sure many of our friends who are on here tonight from CBI have questions for you. And we just want to thank you wholeheartedly for being here with us tonight. And I look forward to hearing from you and continuing the conversation. So with that, I will be quiet and let Eddie. It's hard. You get rabbis on here and we just go. We don't even realize that 5 minutes has gone by. So I will stop. And Eddie, thank you for being here tonight and sharing your story.
Amen. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to see folks on this call. For those of you who are joining, I appreciate to see all the lovely faces. I know folks are joining as well. I am pretty mid-level deep in Pesach. My Israeli mother-in-law was just showing me how, like, at one point we were eating matzah with mayonnaise. I don't know. Things are just wild right now. I crave I crave bread like nothing ever. Where we've been eating matzah with everything you can think of. I'm at the point where I'm eating matzah with, hot sauce. I don't know. I'm getting creative and really trying to figure things out. My Israeli mother-in-law wets her matzah every single time. So like every time I get like a soggy, and if you know Israelis, you know that they do this. So she like wets her matzah and then gives it to us. So it's like, if you have your toppings on it halfway, by the time you get it to you, it's like all soggy and like falling apart, but it does taste better. So we're going there. We're surviving, trucking along. So I appreciate everybody who's on this call. I wanted to really have an open dialogue and conversation with when we talk about migration and what it is, especially us celebrating Pesach. We're celebrating liberation. We're retelling the story of the liberation of our people. And I think that there's so many beautiful texts as we discuss Pesach and as we discuss the Exodus that are so important to really ignite our advocacy in the way that we think about immigration. And I want everybody to have an open mind, and I want everybody to have open dialogue when we get to that section, because I am perfectly comfortable with having those conversations, because I think that as a community, we really need to talk to each other. We tend to not talk to each other. How is it that we're going to create tangible change with each other if we shut each other down and we're like, you know what? I don't agree with you. I'm just not going to listen to you at all. But of course, there needs to be a fine line of separation, of understanding each other, right? My story starts off in a southern region of Michoacan, Mexico, where I was born. I was actually born on a bed of plantains. I was born in a very, very, very remote area of Michoacan, Mexico, to a single mom, And one of the most crucial moments of my life that I remember was the point that my mom decided to migrate with us. We were walking alongside the cobblestones. And as we were walking down the cobblestones, as anybody else would do on their mornings to get everything that they would get, right? We would get our bread, our food for the day. We're going downtown, walking, and I started to smell something. I started to see something that wasn't just quite right. Things weren't adding up. I started to smell something that smelled like chocolate. I started to smell something that smelled like iron, but it didn't add up. And everybody, I want you to smell and taste what I'm tasting right now. That a smell of old rusty copper, the smell of dark chocolate started to give my little brain aromas. As that continued, I started to think to my little self, I was like, what is going on? And then that smell started to get putrid. See, and by now, so I knew something was up because my mom started panicking. She started panicking. She started running towards me. My mom starts running towards me. She picks me up. And as soon as she picks me up, she tried to do something that every mother tries to do. She tried to shield me from seeing something that was intense. She tried to shield me from a pile of bodies that were sent there, that were left there as a warning message to anybody that were to retaliate to the folks in control, that this is what would happen. And see, they were targeting single women because they knew that they didn't have a family to back them up. I was 3 years old when that happened, and I saw that. And to this day, as I reflect having these conversations, and I had the immense honor of being able to have the same conversation and talk about my story with Eli Gotz, who is a Holocaust survivor. And he shared his story of when he first saw a dead body. And it was a recollection that really, it stuck with us. It really stuck with us. From there, my mom ran home with me. And she told my grandmother, we need to leave. We can't live like this. And we decided to make the journey north. We made the journey north, and we crossed into the United States undocumented. And this was prior to 9/11, where migration was not looked upon as it is now. This was in a time where everything wasn't hyper militarized, where the majority of the folks who would migrate into the United States would leave on an average to 6 to 7 months. They would follow migration patterns of cultivation. So folks would come in and leave. But see, what was more and more difficult is after 9/11, a lot of the xenophobia was to blame the other folks, right? So this made migration even harder. Going forth, we're walking in the desert, and everybody here knows how hot it can get, right? Well, I actually migrated through Nogales, Mexico. And I know a lot of you know how hot the desert can get. We walked and we walked and we walked. I was strapped to my mother's back. And you're probably asking yourself, well, why would you do this? My mom was doing what any parent would do, ensuring that her son had a future. We walked for days, for days. Slowly but surely, we started to run out of food and we started to run out of water. And that's when panic hits. That's truly when panic hits, of dehydration, of understanding not that you might die and not really knowing where you're going to go. By this time, we panicked. We then saw a cloud of smoke that seemed to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The smoke turned to dust. The dust turned to lights. The lights turned to screams. The screams turned to guns pointed at our heads. Get down, they said, as they pointed a gun on my mom's neck. Get down, get down. Then they slammed my mom. The ground was so hot that it singed my mother's neck. They put a knee on my mom's neck and said, you're under arrest. They placed us in the back of a car as they took our information. Throughout my entire journey with my mom never flinched. My mom never showed a single act of feeling scared. She would always recite the words, vamos a estar bien, which means we are going to be okay. Vamos a estar bien, we're going to be okay. My mom pulled up the English that she knew from watching American television and listening to the radio. And she said to the officer, the Border Patrol agent, she said, we need food, we need water. Please help. We need food, we need water. Please help. The Border Patrol agent looked back at us. He laughed. He laughed at us. And he threw a pack of saltine crackers at us. That was the first time my mom broke. The very first time I saw her cry. All she would do is hold me, her 4-year-old toddler, close to her chest, and she kept patting me. She kept patting me, and as I felt her tears hit the top of my head, I didn't understand what was going on, but my mom, I could feel her crying so heavily because that person had just dehumanized us and treated us worse than an animal. We were then placed in a cage, a literal cage, my friends, where we had 2 options to drink water. 2. One of them was currently being used by a woman who was taking a makeshift bath, and the other one was a toilet that I could visibly see people drinking out of. My friends, this is the situation of our migration problem that has been systemic And we're talking about 1999 that this issue has been a problem. And let me tell you today that that issue is the same, my friends. We have not progressed at all. At all. We're in the same spot. Regardless of any administration, we are in the same spot because we simply have not put in place migration laws that create a pathway to citizenship, a pathway for legal documentation. I always get this word, and my friends, I'm going to give you some terminology because being in my situation, I've had to become a lawyer. I've had to become a lawyer. I am a translator. I am a doctor. I'm an insurance agent. You name it. I do those things because I grew up translating for my mom. And see, the thing is, now I have I'm part of a program called DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And there's different little subgroups of migration. It can be very confusing, very, very confusing, right? And we have your folks who are undocumented, who crossed undocumented, meaning that they have not had a legal entry into the United States. That's what it means to be undocumented and cross undocumented. You have your folks who the majority of migration of folks who are undocumented are a part of, which are folks who enter the United States documentedly, meaning these folks came into the United States with a visa and overstayed their visa. Folks flew over the wall. Folks flew over the border and simply overstayed their visa. You have what is called an asylum seeker, which is actually in our Constitution, the ability to request asylum by stepping foot into the United States, feeling credible fear of political prosecution, viable prosecution based off of sex, gender, etc. That is one of the most hardest ways of getting any sort of documentation in the United States, is to seek asylum. One of the most difficult ways of getting asylum. Then you have your refugees, who are folks who are processed already outside of the United States, meaning that these folks come into the United States with their documentation already. And these folks have a pathway to citizenship. These folks have a pathway to residency. For folks who are undocumented, there is not a pathway to citizenship. And I get that a lot, right? I always get that question, Eddie, why aren't you legal? And my friends, let me tell you a quick story here. I have a great friend because I went to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And I have a great friend who's from Virginia, from back ends of the woods, Charlottesville, Virginia. My friend is named Spencer. And he talks like this, right? And he said, Eddie, I love you, brother, but we gonna make you a citizen. Yes, we are. Ain't nobody gonna deport you. He said, brother, come here. I'm gonna print the citizenship test right here for you right now. I said, ooh, you are in for a rude awakening. And as I was telling him all, this didn't apply, that can't happen. There is no law. This doesn't exist. This can't happen. He was frustrated. He's like, what? What is going on? I thought it was easy. How come y'all can't just become citizens? Why can't y'all just do this the legal way? Well, my aunt from Lithuania did this a couple of months ago, but she came in with a visa and she married in, and this is how she did it. I'm like, brother, but that doesn't apply to me. Just because she had a pathway doesn't mean there is one for us. He was so physically frustrated. I could see it in his eyes that he was just like enraged with how the system did not work, just fired up. And this is where I let him understand that systemically, we don't have immigration law that is able to give pathway to any sort of residency, of any sort of documentation. Just simply does not exist. And that's that, right? We walk through this in a way that I could show him how difficult it is for folks to even attempt the paperwork. See, and the interesting thing is here, I love my Judaism, and I love my culture and where I come from, but I have to face an uphill battle on two ends, my friends. On two ends. On one end, I have those folks who are telling me, get out of my country. You are an illegal, get out of here, you benefit nothing. Even though they have no idea that I've been devoted, my life has been devoted to helping out my Jewish community, to interconnecting communities to come together. He has no idea that I devote myself to standing up for the most vulnerable communities. But I also get the other charge of understanding that I'm Jewish. Just today, I received the most anti-Semitic email of folks literally putting my face to the most horrific anti-immigrant, anti-Israel, anti-Jewish that you can get. So I get like both sides of this. I get like both sides of the coin. And it's really interesting when we look at how we address migration. And as Jews, I can almost guarantee that a lot of our us on this call have had ancestors who migrated. And we know by history, a lot of folks actually migrated into the United States undocumentedly, falsifying records to get here. We know that that's true. A lot of my friends from Hias and I have had these conversations where we talk about how folks falsified records to get into the United States. You guys know why? Check this out. Because the United States actually didn't want to take in folks coming in from Europe, fleeing the Holocaust. They didn't want that at all. They said, nope, no, thank you. Not our problem. We don't want these folks. Could you imagine how many families would be alive if we were to have a pathway for folks to come in as refugees during that time? How many millions of seders could happen right now if that was a possibility? And I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget where our history came from. It's easy for us to remind and say, well, that happened a long time ago. But my friends, things like that happen now. And I think that is so important that we have our famous verse in Torah, right? That you should not oppress a stranger. Raise your hand if you've seen that post. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you yourself, here it goes. I found it. You should not oppress a stranger, for you know the feeling of being a stranger and have yourself been strangers in the land of Egypt. And this is literally what we're talking about, right? But I think that it's so interesting how we move past that, because that's me. That interpretation to me is kind of giving me the interpretation of tolerance, right? Like we're tolerating the stranger, the gear. We're like, okay, they're not Jews, but we're gonna tolerate them. We're not gonna like be mean. If folks need food, then we'll feed them. We'll have the mitzvah, but we'll tolerate them. But isn't it interesting how in Torah we actually move a different pathway later on? We move into you must love the stranger. And it's very different than just tolerance. Very different. Because the way I advocate for people I love is way different than the way I advocate for those I tolerate. Way different. Because if somebody says something about me, I bet you my Israeli mother will burn any house down. She will be heard because she loves me. So our advocacy and the way that we talk has to come down from our stories, from our history. And just as we know scientifically that trauma, my friends, trauma can go down through generations. My spouse, her mom, they are here because they are Holocaust survivors. And we know that trauma goes down through generations. But I want to point this little thought and keep it in you. Just as trauma goes down generations, how can we make it so that we revive compassion to go down our generations? The compassion that maybe some of our families were given, the empathy that was grown upon. What is that? How can we ignite that within each other? And see, my friends, now I point to one of the greatest points that I love from Rabbi Akiva when we talk about, well, Eddie, what can we do? What can we do? Here's what we can do, my friends. We can be consistent with the way that we talk about migration and understand that we call out every administration. That's right. And I also sometimes get I get a lot of heat from some of my progressive leaning friends when I say, no, just because this person's wearing a different hat doesn't mean that I'm not going to call them out for policies that are unfair and unjust. Because as Jews, our job is to stand up for the most vulnerable communities, because we know that as Jews, we know what the struggle is of being marginalized and oppressed. We fundamentally understand. And Rabbi Akiva talked about one of the most important things ever that I think is just so beautiful. He talked about the power of consistency as he was sitting down observing a water droplet hit a rock. And he said to himself, my goodness, like, take a look at that. A simple little water droplet kept consistently hitting a rock. And slowly but surely what happened, it started to create a hole, right? It started to create a hole. And he said, my goodness, what would happen if that consistency were to hit my soft heart from Torah? Think about the consistency that we have if we were to advocate for communities together, to keep the conversation going. During our Pesach, we ignite our liberation, my friends. We remind ourselves of the struggle, but we should also keep that in mind, and that consistency in our advocacy, in the way that we talk, the way that we think, the way that we move. Because this, and having these types of conversations, is how we get to know each other. It's how we break through. It's how we get to understand situations. See, because now you know a face. Now it's better than just seeing numbers on the news that say hundreds of illegals are coming. Now you know one of those so quote unquote illegals who's fighting here in the Jewish community to give our Jewish community such a bold, powerful name, to show that we are here, we are strong. The Jewish community here has been able to support more than 40,000 asylum seekers. Yes, my friends. The Jewish community here has been able to do that. The Jewish community here has been able to send hygienic kits. We have been able to support some of our most vulnerable populations here together. So now we're going to move into a group of our section of questions. I encourage y'all to ask those questions that are kind of uncomfortable, that you're like, I want to ask that, but I'm not really sure. My friends, this is the time to ask that. I will take in your questions. Obviously, you know, you're not going to say something like, hey, Eddie, do you smell? Like, do you shower? I don't feel like we're going to have those conversations, but I encourage y'all to ask questions that lead into dialogue, that we may not necessarily agree on policy, right? Some of y'all are like, you know what? We need more security. Some of you are like, maybe we need less security. Some of you are thinking, well, we should probably fix the issues where folks are coming from before they even reach that. And my friends, those are all policy. We can all agree on that. But in a place where we should be in consensus is understanding the humanity and helping our fellow people. Thank you.
Eddie, thank you so much for your wisdom and for your vulnerability and for her little call to action in there too. So there was a lot there, I think, for us to unpack, and we'll continue to unpack. I want to encourage everyone, as I think that we are a small enough group here tonight that if you have a question, you can either raise your hand. I can see everyone on my screen, so you can raise your hand and ask out loud, or if you would rather put it in the chat, you can do that. In the meantime, while everyone is gathering their thoughts, I would like to know, I'm gonna Rabbi's privilege, I'm gonna start. So Eddie, I'm wondering, from your perspective as both someone who immigrated to America and as a Jew, as we tell this story of our liberation, if there are ways in which this does feel like a parallel story, the story of the Israelite exodus from Egypt, and the story of immigration that we see in our world today, and the way that this does feel like a parallel story, or if there are ways in which making that parallel sometimes feels inaccurate or insensitive.
Definitely. I love that question, because I think that there's definitely parallels where we can kind of think of how migration works, right? Just like how migration is pushed upon by violence, right? By credible fear of blame, of hardship, that folks are forced to leave out. And we're literally eating matzah because we didn't have time. We were told, get out. Come on, let's go. My mom had the exact same way. They were literally like killing people down the street. We had no choice. We had to get everything we had in our we could carry in our backpack. So I always relate to those struggles. I also relate to Moses a lot. I really do. In the way that, Moses didn't really want to do this, right? He didn't really want to be a leader or any of this. In the way that I advocate for migration, sometimes I really don't want to do it. I don't want to talk about this. But then I see the faces of children that are handcuffed, that are released in asylum, who are seeking asylum here. And I just think to myself, goodness, we must do something. And our story of liberation is a story of liberation, of self-liberation that a lot of countless families are searching for. So that to me is where I bring my parallels and where I like, okay, this is where that kind of fuels me and sparks of action. But there definitely is situations where we understand fundamentally that, it is unique to the Jewish experience.
Thank you. All right, I'm seeing some questions come in, and I see Marty's got a hand up. So I'll continue to pepper mine in there. But let's, Nikki was asking a little bit more about your story. She wanted to know how the rest of your family is, what happened, how your mom is and your grandma, and also about if what you remember from Nogales is similar to what is happening there now. If you can, so that's maybe a little bit of a 2-in-1.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, Nikki. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm hoping that you're settling in and you're enjoying everything here in Phoenix. My mom lives in Colorado. She owns a little restaurant. She loves life, and she's still the fighter that made sure that I didn't die in the desert. My grandmother passed away in 2019, and this was a cruel awakening of understanding that sometimes I have privilege in having DACA. I can work. I have a social security. I have a license. I pay taxes. And my grandmother passed away from a heart attack. She literally had the biggest heart. And at the end of the day, it was her downfall. And I had to go and consult my mom, who hadn't seen her mom in 30 plus years. And I had to watch my mom watch her mom get buried on FaceTime. And as you recall the story of me saying how my mom held me as she cried, I had to hold my mom as she was crying, because we couldn't leave the country to be there and witness my grandma's burial. I literally had in one hand to clean my phone of tears, and in the other hand, I held my mom as she virtually said her last goodbyes. That was a cruel reminder of how still broken our immigration system is, and how it isn't just as easy as people think it is. But my grandmother's memory lives embedded in me and in the work that I do, and will forever be next to me. So thank you. And yes, no, unfortunately, the situation in Nogales is just as horrible. It's just as horrible, unfortunately.
Thank you for sharing that. And unfortunately, far too many of us now are learning how difficult it can be to be so far away from our pain. And I'm sorry that you were learning that even earlier. Marty, I saw that you had a hand up. But go ahead and unmute yourself. Marty, I think you're on mute. Marty, you're on mute. There you go.
Got it. You okay? Eddie, your story is compelling and important. I wanted to know if you were aware that there really are many, scratch that, there are groups that are reasonably powerful, but not as powerful as the antis at this point, who have been working 5 years ago with Justice O'Connor here in Arizona, actually creating a national interest. And we had Schumer and the whole gang here to make sure they understood how important resolving these issues were. Now we have another group, and I'd be glad to talk to you about it, which includes people that, some of you may know, like Denise Resnick, who's, the autism because of her son, and many others in town, and many Jews in leadership who are working very hard in the trenches on the policy changes that are necessary, and just keep hammering on the issue, which of course is very, very difficult. So I would be glad to introduce you to that, and you would be enormously helpful with your passion and knowledge.
Amen. Thank you so much. I think of the glorious light of the Jewish community. How beautiful that in the trenches, we're out here working on policy to make sure that our communities are glowing. How beautiful is that, right? No darkness is too dark for our Jewish community to shine brightly. Thank you so much, Marty, for your advocacy. And
would you give us an update from your standpoint? And it isn't all black, dark, and negative. What do you see might happen? Biden administration, I realize the mixed bag, but talk to us, if you will, and bring us up to date about what activists like yourself see.
Thank you. I think that right now we have a very hard battle with the Dream and Promise Act, because we're going to need 60 senators to vote for it. And the Dream and Promise Act would just be an enormous support for families. It would give a viable way for folks to have any sort of pathway to residency and documentation. This would be the epicenter of change. Right now, DACA is still in the courts. It was there was a court hearing yesterday, right, where the Attorney General of Texas is still fighting to end DACA. So we know that that's there. We're hoping that pressure can get moved into the Senate, and folks can get persuaded to side with folks like me, to be able to pass some sort of bill that would just be beneficial to hundreds of people like me. But I honestly, I don't see it coming. I don't see it. I don't see us getting the support that we need from the Senate. So it's very difficult for me to have hope right now. I think I have more of a realistic approach into how I view policy. And I actually am in conversations a lot with the administration, and I have the amazing opportunity to be in conversations with a lot of the organizations that are there in the policy side, like HIAS, et cetera, who are kind of asking, like, what is the ways that we can move? What is something that we can do? But from a policy standpoint, I think it's going to be a real tough battle for folks right now. And that's regardless of the administration up hand.
Eddie, as a bit of a follow-up to that question, we had another question that I received privately about, in addition to what you just mentioned, what other changes would you make to our asylum and immigration laws to best address the needs of migrants? In your dream world, what would it look like?
Amen. That's such a hard question, right? It's like asking me to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict right now. You have 5 minutes.
If you could do that also, that would.
If you can do that great. Next, solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you have 5 minutes, go. I think that there needs to be a structural change within how we address migration and how we handle migration. There also needs to be a point in where we address the issue at hand, right? Like helping and supporting folks who are desperately needing it down there, so that folks don't have a reason to leave, so that folks feel comfortable where they are. But if those folks are forced to leave, that we have a responsible way of supporting people, that we have a viable way of supporting people. That's, in my sense, a way of being able to support. And I'm not saying, like, let's go ahead and just open the border. and let everybody in. What I'm saying is that let's do it in a way that is viable, in a way that makes sense, in a way that is championed by our humanity first, a way that supports communities, a way that supports folks who may be suffering in their home countries, seeing if there's ways where we can help out. Because if we can help out the core of the fire and put that out, then the sparks don't necessarily hit us, right? I think that's one of the ways as of now, then in Eddie's kind of mind, where we could work collectively in trying to repair this world of ours, to be able to build some sort of tangible way.
It reminds me of the story that's often told in community organizing circles about the babies in the river.
Babies
and trying to save all the babies, right? Save all the babies that are coming down the river until someone finally goes to see who's throwing the babies in the river. And what can we do to stop the problem at the source and to give everyone a good start, so we can all swim in the river. I don't know. Audrey, I saw that you had a hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi, for bringing Eddie to our lives and our homes. And thank you, Eddie. I guess what I really want to ask, it may sound very naive, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't feel such huge sadness for the immigration situation. And then also guilt and my own gratefulness for being here and being comfortable. So is there anything you might say that I as an individual might be doing?
Definitely. We support migrants every single day at Jews for Justice. We build hygienic kits. So we are obviously in a pandemic. I do not want to put anybody's health at risk. So if you can stay home and support us by helping us make hygienic kits, beautiful. We can pick up the hygienic kits from your porch and you would be supporting families every single day. That's a very viable way of supporting people. For those of you who have been vaccinated and are interested in helping in person, I can help with the logistics of what that looks like. And for those of you who are interested in seeing what that looks like, let me tell you that it's very difficult to see. I brought in a group of Jews from California in early 2019, and I let them know you might see things that might break you down. And they said, Eddie, we're good. We know why we're here. And as the bus came in, there was a group of children that first came out. And one of the Jewish women started to cry. And I said, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need medical attention? And she said, look at their wrist. Look at their wrist. And I looked at the children's wrist and I could see that there was numbers written on them to make sure that they correlate with the numbers written in Sharpie on their parents' wrist. And it hit them. So my friends, there's always a way to support. I will make sure to drop down my email, as well as Rabbi Sarah has my email. Please email me directly. I'm more than happy to help make that happen.
I need to be doing that rather than feeling sad.
Amen.
And as you're mentioning that, I want to also remind you that our CBI Cares group has been doing monthly, Eddie, that's to remind our CBI people, not you. We've been doing these monthly collections, and in the month of January and February, we were collecting personal care items for asylum seekers in partnership with you in Arizona Jews for Justice and the Pack the Bus Project. I will tell you, I've got a pretty sad looking box in my office that really doesn't, it's got a couple nice things in it. So those of you who did bring items for asylum seekers, I want to thank you for those of you who did. But by and large, there wasn't much. And so I have not brought it to Eddie yet because I wanted to, at this juncture, at this opportunity, when I can see at least some of your faces, to ask you before I bring the box to Eddie, if there's anything, I can resend you the email that has the list of items that they are collecting so that we can provide a little bit more. And then Eddie, if you'll let us know what we can do to continue this partnership and this collection, I think hygiene items are absolutely something that we can help to provide. So this project is not over yet, and we will continue to support. And thank you, Audrey, for the nudge that we need to, instead of feeling sad, to take that sadness and translate it to action, which is hard to do, but really all there is to do. So thank you for that. Well, that was where I was. Yes, Dory, I will resend the list. I'll make sure it gets into this week's newsletter. How about that, instead of trying to remember everyone who asked for it? So I'll rewrite it. Any other questions? I have a couple more things that I'm curious about, but would love to hear from you first. If any of you have any other questions that have been on your mind as Eddie's been speaking. We have about 10 more minutes. Stephen, Ryder.
Yes, you know, in theory, there's US law and international law that protects asylum seekers, but we just haven't followed those laws. And, you know, getting new laws written is, I agree, a heavy lift in the current Congress. And I get scared of a big immigration bill because it's going to be so big that nothing happens. And I think we have to deal with the dreamers first. But how do we build a narrative that supports the notion that we are a country that historically was committed to providing asylum? International law requires it of us, and our own law requires it, but we just shrunk the system down. I mean, the problem is that it's thousands of people, you know, camels going through the eye of a needle. It's just too many people. And I think somehow we have to build support for that. And what struck me at the beginning was your remarks about the fact that we all have immigrant families. People in my family immigrated from Europe in the 30s and entered the country illegally. So how do we, you know, seems to me we have to just build a support for it. And I think the American people do support it, but those are not the voices everybody hears. They don't hear you, Eddie.
Yes. What a bracha, your words. Yes, indeed. This is where I think that one of the most important key aspects of our work is literally spreading the word, is literally having conversations and changing the narrative. Because words are so powerful, my friends. The dehumanization of migration is so powerful that happens here in the United States. And it painfully reminds me, and it's an utter kind of gross feeling that I get when large groups of people are dehumanized from being people into being digits, into being criminals, into being offenders. It shakes my bones when I hear it. So our job is to shake that and change the narrative completely. Change it and look at it from a humanitarian aspect. Look at it from our compassion. Take back our history and think about our ancestors and where were our ancestors? What compassion would you offer to your ancestors if they needed it? How would you have that conversation? How would you have a conversation with somebody to let them know that your grandmother was running away from something horrific and that she needed a place to stay? Change the narrative, my friends. And I agree with you so much, Stefan. I think that this immigration bill is so expensive that I doubt that it will pass. But I don't doubt the progress that's being made. And the conversation is being placed on the table. Conversation is being placed on the table and the steps are being made. See, because my friends, Rabbi Shmuley today said something really beautiful that I've been resonating with. And he said that liberation isn't done, that it's a continuous work. And just like our policy and our fight and championing for better communities, it's a continuous work, but we have to keep fighting. So I appreciate folks like you, Stefan.
Tell Rabbi Shmuley that was very reconstructionist of him. I love that. Eddie, I've been getting some more questions. There really is a deep desire from our community to participate and to help and to do more than mental gymnastics, but to really know how we can continue to be helpful on the ground. So a two-pronged question. One from the private chat to me is, you said that you have had to, in order to help your family, you've had to be a lawyer and a doctor and an insurance man. And we're wondering if Arizona Jews for Justice needs volunteers with particular skill sets, and if maybe we have people in our community who have those particular skill sets. And I think as a follow-up to that, what I'm wondering specifically is, how can CBI be a good partner for you and the work that you're doing? How can we dive in more deeply to this partnership?
Oh, that is beautiful. See, this is why I am so proud of our Jewish community. You know, so proud of our Jewish community. I love my Christian brethren, but my Jewish community never dilutes the support. Always ready to support. This is what I love. It jazzes me up. We are here. Amen to that. Here's the thing, my friends. I need support from lawyers. I need support from physicians. I need support from folks who speak multiple languages. And my friends, yes, we get people from all over the world. They aren't just coming from Mexico. I have helped folks from Romania. I have helped folks from Russia. I had a person from Russia recognize my Torah. And he said, my friend, so beautiful to see Torah. I have had folks from Brazil, from all over the place. Folks who are able to be on the phone. And all of this, guess what? We can do remotely with the power of Zoom. All of this can be done remotely. All of this can be done from a way of being safe. And the funny thing is that even if you can't do it, you might know a lawyer. You might know a doctor. And just having that simple conversation saying, hey, I met this guy, Eddie, crazy guy, you know, talking to us about his story. He's helping a lot of people and we need some support. You think you can help out? And magically that happens. Magically that happens. And that's how we start to make the change. Collectively, I think such a beautiful partnership with CBI is growing already and just expanding marvelously. But we have to stay in communication, my friends. We have to stay consistent and stay together, because the championing of supporting folks isn't about me. It isn't about Jews for Justice. It's about the people we're supporting. And we have to make sure that all of us collectively are supporting. So I will make sure I give you my word that I will be in communication with Rabbi Sarah to make sure that we have the most amount of people and we have the best support.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And I know that we have at least a couple lawyers here and probably some other expertise as well. So if you all have a specific expertise that you would like to offer to help, please let me know and I can help connect you with Eddie so that we can put these words into action. We have covered my list of questions. Does anyone else have anything that you have been holding on to that you wanted to ask?
Another thing,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sarah. Another thing.
Wait, what do we call it now? We don't call it interrupting. It's like communal overlap or something.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's got a new name.
Thank you. One thing that we need a lot is food. We need a lot of food. And folks are eating a lot of food. I have personally fed gallons and gallons and gallons of matzo ball soup to asylum seekers. You get 4 Jewish moms and you can get hundreds of gallons of matzo ball soup. But it's interesting, this fun thing happened one time. I get my volunteers to show up and they said, Eddie, we made food, all taken care of, you can go home. I get home and I get a call, Eddie, they're not eating. I said, well, what did you make them? We said, we made them Israeli salad and they're not eating. I said, well, my friend, we're gonna have to make something else because I don't think they're gonna really want that. So we got going on some great matzo ball soup. So yes, my friends, some food is always wanted. Imagine going through what you went through and having something warm in your belly and how much that reignites your soul.
And matzah doesn't do it. It's got to be the soup. Thank you so much for bringing your story, your vulnerability, and your impressively practical ways for us to put our hands in it and really start to make a difference. And Audrey, I think you put it so beautifully when you said that we have a tendency to be overwhelmed by the weight of the world, and it hurts. And one thing that we can do to ease our own pain is by helping to ease the pain of others. So let's, oh, Eddie, I'm so touched by what you said about the generational passing of whether it's going to be trauma or whether it's going to be growth, and how can we continue to grow, and how can we take the compassion of our ancestors and bring it into the future. So I think we've got a really lovely start here. We're going to, this has been recorded, so you can tell your friends that they missed it and they should watch, and that we'll continue to move forward on this project. But most of all, Eddie, I just want to thank you for sharing and wish you just a delightful rest of Passover. I hope it brings more of that progress of liberation as we move towards it. Thank you all so much for being here. 8 o'clock on the nose. Well done. I look forward to continuing the conversation, and thank you for joining us. You can unmute and say goodbye if you'd like. Thanks, everyone.